I mean, I'm guessing, we're not told exactly, but his stepmom, if you will, Sarah, probably never liked him. It's also possible that Ishmael maybe had some violent tendencies. We don't know for certain, but we know that he grows up to become an archer and a hunter in just a few verses. And we know from chapter 16, verse 12, that he will be known as a wild donkey of a man who lives in the wilderness, does not conform to the norm or society. Sarah, as opposed to just thinking poorly of her, I have to believe she was actually truly concerned for the safety of her son Isaac. I mean, it wasn't but a few generations before them that two brothers, one killed the other. But God intervened here. And this was not an easy command. He asked Abraham not to be distressed. In other words, let not bad be in your eyes. And to go ahead and send them away. Listen to your wife. Do what she says, even if her motives are wrong, which we aren't certain what they were. This is hard to swallow. How could a loving God known as our Father, tender and caring, do this? And this is where we are confronted with the reality that his sovereignty and his providence is not always going to make sense to us. Sometimes it's heartbreakingly painful. Again, it's not our place to know the why, but to trust him. And in this case, God gave Abraham just enough clarity to help him continue on, promising to take care of Ishmael, promising to make a nation from him, which would be fulfilling the promise that he gave Abraham. All the nations of the earth will be blessed through him, from chapter 18, verse 18. And we see that Abraham's faith is growing. God keeps on getting better in his heart and mind and eyes. So early the next morning he obeyed, and he sent them out. Probably never saw him again. My family's had a similar experience. I don't claim to know what Abraham went through, but if it's anything close to what we have, it hurts. But God gives us more clarity than he gave Abraham at the time. We know that Ishmael's descendants and offspring grow up, and they're in conflict with Isaac's descendants. So we can only imagine, if we traced it back, that there would have been an issue in that home. Paul, the apostle, also gives us an explanation in Galatians 4, verses 21 to 31. And if you just read that by yourself without understanding this, you'd be like, what is he even saying? This makes no sense. But now that we have this background in Genesis, if you then flip to Galatians 4 and read these verses, you're like, oh, clarity starts coming. Ishmael was born, so just to summarize that passage, feel free to flip there if you want, but just to summarize that passage, Ishmael was born out of man's efforts, as Paul references, the flesh, not God's. Remember, Abraham and Sarah tried to resolve their childless problem by taking matters into their own hands through Hagar. Isaac was born in the Spirit, through God's promises. In other words, Abraham and Sarah could take no credit. Their bodies were done. But God made it happen. And that is like salvation. When we take things into our own hands and do things by our own ways, it's like we are the offspring of Ishmael, figuratively. And when we choose to surrender our lives, trust God's sovereignty and providence over us, We are like the offspring of Isaac, figuratively. We are to drive out the slave and her son, figuratively, meaning our flesh, meaning ourselves, because we are the children, figuratively, of the free woman, Sarah.